Hey everyone, my name's Dom, welcome to the channel. Now, unless you're late in coming to this video, you won't have failed to have noticed that 2022 is just around the corner. So today I've set myself a challenge of recommending to you 22 different fantasy series to check out in 2022. To make it a little bit more difficult, I've given myself a time limit of 20 minutes to do this. So I've got 20 minutes to recommend 22 titles for you to check out in 2022. Do you like what I did there? Well, let's go see the books. So this is going to be a challenge, 20 minutes to talk about 22 titles, and here I am just talking in general instead of talking about the books. Just quickly before we get into it though, I've read all of these series, or at least one book in the series, so they are personal recommendations. I can't recommend something that I've not read, that would not be right for me to do. Most of these I've got at least one book in physical format. There are 3 series that I'm going to recommend today that are in digital format, however, and because of the time limits I will briefly talk about each title, and I'll put a few details for each series in a box just here so you can get a bit more of an overview of some of the selling points of each series as I go through them. Now, I admit I will probably lose track of the numbering as I go through this, so I'm not going to call out numbers and say this is the 10th, the 12th, the 15th title. Instead, what I'll do is I will link the number and the title of the series in the timestamps below, so you can skip ahead to whichever series you want to get a little bit of information on. So I've got a pile of books beside me ready to go, and I'm going to talk about a mixture of series today, old and new, finished and unfinished, traditional and self-published. So with all that said, let's dive in and take a look at our first series. Okay, so the first of the titles I'm going to recommend is The Greatcoats by Sebastian de Castell. 4 books, starting with this one, Traitor's Blade. This is a complete series, so it's ready for you to binge through to the end if you so wish. It's a great story of brotherhood. We've got a king who has died, and his greatcoats, his old magisters, are trying to hold on to his ideals and the way of life pretty much that they had under their old king, as they travel around the countryside, essentially trying to fulfill the king's dying wish. It's a fantastic series with some great humour and some really good emotional scenes in there as well. Next up, we've got an extended series, but starting with the Dark Elf trilogy. This is the Legend of Drizzt by R.A. Salvatore. It's a series set in the Forgotten Realms, and this is kind of one of the ultimate found family tales. We're following a legendary and long-lived main character, and several of the characters within these extended series are also long-lived, so we have many adventures with them. Drizzt is one of my favourite fantasy characters of all time. He's an absolute legend in the genre, and if you haven't read them, the Dark Elf trilogy here is a good place to start. It's essentially the origin story of the Dark Elf Drizzt, and it's a really good time. Next up, the Chronicles of the Unhewn Throne, starting with The Emperor's Blades by Brian Staveley. This is a really fun tale where the military rides giant eagles called ketrels, and it's got some good political machinations in there as well. There's a read-along going to be starting for the Chronicles of the Unhewn Throne over at the Library of Alexandria, so it's a really good time to pick this series up if it's one that's floating your boat. Next, how could I not have my favourite series of all time, The Faithful and the Fallen, or the extended series, the overall saga of the Banished Lands, including these guys as well, the trilogy of Blood and Bone. This is a series with a real classic fantasy feel to it. There's a lot of talk of tropes going along with this series, and they are all, in my opinion, done really well. It's not a case of reimagining the genre, but it definitely does bring a breath of fresh air to a lot of those tropes. If you haven't picked up The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne, definitely recommend that you do so. If you like epic fantasy, this is one of the best. Talking of epic, next on my list is The Riftwar by Raymond E. Feist. This is another series like Drizzt before it, which has an ongoing set of additional series afterwards. So the Riftwar series itself is a trilogy, and then there's another 30 odd books, all set in this world of Midkemia, continuing the story of some of our long-lived characters and this world, these kingdoms that we're battling over, starting with Magician here. Moving on to, I think this is the first series in the list that hasn't yet been completed. This is the Green Rider series by Kristen Britton. This is a series currently on 7 books and some additional shorter stories or novellas, I believe, and there is at least one more title to come, so this is nearly finished. But this is a story of a kick-ass heroine who basically takes on a king's message from a dying messenger and takes on the mantle of one of the Green Riders. It's a really good epic fantasy with a classic feel, and if you haven't read it and you want to, there is a read along of this one starting up soon as well over at Fina Reads. I'll link her channel in the description box below. Another series that hasn't yet been finished, and in fact there is only one book released in this one, but I believe the second book is aimed to be released at some point towards the end of 2022. And I hope it does come along then and I don't have even longer to wait. But this one is one of my recent reads, and it's the Illborn Saga by Daniel T. Jackson. This is a multi-continent spanning epic with fantastic characters, magic, holy wars, the whole caboodle. It's definitely well worth a read, and it's self-published as well. So it's one of the many self-pub gems that you can pick up. Another one of the self-pub titles that I'm going to recommend is the Coraidic Sagas by Alicia Wanstall-Burke. This is a trilogy with the third book about to be released. It comes out towards the end of January 2022. So this is a series following 2 main characters and starting off with Blood of Heirs. They are 2 heirs of very different cultures. So on the one hand we've got the daughter of a tribe chief who's becoming a kick-ass warrior in her own right, and on the other hand we've got a young duke's son who's got a secret that even he's not aware of at the start of the book. A really interesting series with some great moments in it, and I'm enjoying my time going through this one. Continuing the self-pub theme, this isn't a self-published, but it did originally start out that way, and it's Riyria Revelations. You will normally now find this in 3 books, which is a bind-up of 2 stories in each of them. They were originally released as 6 individual stories. This is one of the ultimate fantasy bromances, with the warrior Hadrian and the thief Royce getting up to all sorts of fun and mischief. But it's a really good, light-hearted series, and there's some absolutely epic moments in there as well. If we want to talk epic though, why not go with one of the most epic? The Wheel of Time is 14 books plus a prequel novel as well, and there's no better time to pick this up to read with the adaptation currently running through its first series. But if you want to read more, if the adaptation has whet your appetite for this series, there are some big meaty books for you to get your teeth into, and this will probably keep you going for a good long while. Now my next series to recommend is Licanius by James Islington. Some people refer to this one as Wheel of Time Light, and although I disagree with that terminology, I can see where they're coming from because there's a lot of similar themes to the epic Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. This is a real good fun time. It's a coming of age story with some great characters and some good moments to be found in here. Another one of my more recent reads, and a series that's as yet to be completed, is The Reborn Empire by Devin Madsen. Starting off with We Ride the Storm. Book 4 of this series is scheduled for release, I think, in December 2022. So a little bit of a time to wait, but we've got 3 books to keep us going in the meantime. We've got a series of characters in here who are all epic in their own right, and there's some real nice interweaving of those storylines as you plough through the pages of this one. Moving on to another series with plenty of pages in it, we've got The Shadows of the Apt by Adrian Tchaikovsky, starting off with Empire in Black and Gold. A lot of people are getting familiar with this one due to a read-along, again hosted by the Library of Alexandria in the last few months. This is some of the best world building that I have seen. It is a really unique and intriguing world, and there's some fantastic characters that go along with that, some intriguing magic and other devices, so there's a real good time to be had with this 10-book series. Next up, I've picked out all 3 books of these because I really like the way they look together. We've got A Memory of Flames by Stephen Dias, starting with The Adamantine Palace. We've then got Order of the Scales and King of the Crags. Can't remember which order they're in, but this is a really nice looking series. Quite a short one, so it's good if you're looking for a palate cleanser or for just a quick series, quick trilogy to get your way through. As you can guess from the covers, there are dragons to be found here. We are talking a nobility who ride dragons into battle, and there's a lot of politics in this as well, as various nobles battle for the throne. So it's a really good series, quite a quick read. It's not a new one, but it's one that I think has definitely flown a bit under the radar. Next up is one that is definitely to be considered a classic. It's a lot more well known and by one of the legendary authors in the genre, and it is, quite fittingly, Legend, which kicks off the Drenai Saga by David Gemmell. This is a multi-generational story, so we're not talking a big expansive series where we have the same characters from start to end. You'll generally find with these titles that each new book has new characters, or if there are characters who you meet again, you will only do so for 2 or 3 books, generally speaking. But some of the great characters of classic fantasy can be found within the pages of the Drenai Saga, with Drizzt, the eponymous legend, being foremost amongst them. Next up, I'll talk about another one of the digital titles that I've got. This is the Continua Chronicles by Jim Wilborn, starting off with the 7th Cadence, which gained some real good traction, largely I think because of a gorgeous blue dragon on the cover, but this is also a really good story. We're talking about forbidden magic, or people trying to bring magic back into the world, and there's some real good character moments to be found in this story and some really good potential for the series as it continues. Next up, I'm going to go with the Coppercat trilogy by Jen Williams, starting off with this one, The Copper Promise. This is a book that's kind of got a bit of a dungeon crawler feel, as we've got a band of adventurers exploring the kind of forgotten depths of a citadel, looking initially for a big payoff, but a lot more ensues. This is a series that was originally split into 4, so the first book is maybe a little bit disjointed, but there's still some real good times to be had going through these stories. Another big series to get your teeth into if you enjoy it is by Marcus Heitz, and this is The Dwarves, starting off with a book of the same name. There are 5 of these that have been translated from the original German, and they are all about the same size, so plenty of pages here to get your teeth into. If you're looking for a fantasy series where it's not humans front and centre, this one, as you can guess by the title, gives the dwarves their day instead. Again, this is a series that's got a real classic vibe to it, but there's some real good adventure here with our heroes as they try to stave off attacks from the Dark Elves, the Elfar and Orcs as this story progresses. I've got some big weighty tomes left still to come on this list, and the first of those is The Deed of Paksenarrion by Elizabeth Moon. This one is a bind-up. This is a full trilogy in this particular bind-up, but this is a real good coming-of-age story. So it starts off with Sheep Farmer's daughter, and that's where our main character, Paksenarrion, starts off her life as well. But as depicted on the front cover, she works her way through the military to become a paladin, and there's a real good adventure story telling the tale of how she did that. Of a similar size, for the paperback at least, I've then got The Bound and the Broken by Ryan Cahill. You'll have seen me talk about this quite a bit recently if you're familiar with the channel, so you can check out my recent videos on this particular series, but this one is another dragon riding adventure, talking about picking up magic and sparking rebellion and fighting to defeat the evil empire. This is a fantastically crafted story, and as I've said before recently, if you haven't picked it up, go out and do so. Another self-published gem that I absolutely urge you to pick up if you haven't done already is Threadlight by Zach Argyle. There are 3 books in this series, with the 3rd of those due to come out in August 2022, so the trilogy is nearly complete. There's some really interesting magic, some fantastic character and family moments in this one, and some really cool animal companions as well, if that floats your particular boat. And the last title that I've got for this list of recommendations is another one with a new book coming out in 2022. In April we have book 2, and this is The Bloodsworn, another title by John Gwynne. So we've got Shadow of the Gods, Hunger of the Gods had its cover reveal recently, and like this title before it, people are going a little bit wild for it. This is a Norse-inspired tale, so it's definitely a departure from the Faithful and the Fallen and the other Banished Land tales that we've seen from John Gwynne before, but it is one that is not to be missed, and I'm really looking forward to continuing this series myself and seeing just how good it gets, because there is a lot of promise in this opening book. So there you go, 22 series that I recommend if you haven't already done so. Pick up these in 2022, and if you do so, come back here and let me know what you've thought of them. Drop me comments down below as usual with your thoughts on these series. Have you got any additional series that you recommend people pick up in 2022? I'll hopefully see you in another video soon, but until then, as always, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.